I have a little bit of an introduction about myself. I have been writing about Bitcoin since 2014 with Forbes, with different outlets, including Forbes. And since 2018, I've been doing a lot of writing about China. So people always ask me all the time, why write a book about Bitcoin in China? Because China banned Bitcoin, and thus the story is over. But I believe that, the themes between Bitcoin and China and what's happening, and I kind of try to juxtapose that on the slides, with the Hong Kong protests, which I also covered in 2019, as well as the fact that Hong Kong has launched and is trying to be a financial hubspot for Ether ETFs and Bitcoin spot ETFs and everything. So what's going on? What's happening? So I truly believe that the past, present, and future of Bitcoin in China will tell us so much about how the world will be run in 2050, 2060, and 2070. And I'm going to start off a little bit by giving you all a little bit of a history lesson, I guess. But China is the first country that saw the invention of paper money. It's been through incredible bouts of inflation in the past. One of them actually toppled the Yuan dynasty. So if you all remember Genghis Khan and the fact he conquered half the world, that fell apart because they printed too much paper money. And then there's also, when Mao Zedong seized power, the nationalists were facing incredible amounts of inflation. So everybody always talks about Weimar Germany. Everybody always talks about this is what caused Nazism. But people forget that in Shanghai during the 1940s, there was people carting wheelbarrows of paper money. There was equally as bad inflation, and that was one of the reasons why the communists were able to seize power. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics. Fortunately, the talk is going to be a little bit condensed because I have to go downstairs to my book signing. Please attend if you want. Woohoo! Just really, really quickly, the other two photos I have on here, one is you probably recognize Xi Jinping, who is the General Secretary, paramount leader of China right now, probably going to continue to be since 2029. Next to him is actually Liu He, who is the person who advocated for the Bitcoin mining crackdown and ban. And actually, I think one of the most important people in the space that no one quite understands. So when everybody talks about, did China ban Bitcoin, did China not ban Bitcoin, they should get to know Liu He a little bit better. And then the last slide is kind of the ECNY, which is the China's version of the central bank digital currency. People always ask me, what is the use of all cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and everything. And we have to remember that one of the principal reasons why the cypherpunks created Bitcoin was because of the fear of central banks taking control of people's money, surveilling it and controlling it perfectly. And in China, I believe the digital yuan is a prototype for that. So we'll get into that. So first, what is happening with Bitcoin in China? This is kind of summing it up, I think. There's a lock. There's several bans. We'll talk about it. But you might be asking, well, I know a lot of Web3 or L2 people, and they're all from China, or people are investing and stuff like that. There's a lot of activity in ordinals, or what's going on with this? There's Bitcoin miners that have left the country and gone. And so my answer to that is always that, the Chinese government and the Chinese people are very different. And I believe that there's still very, very strong interest from Chinese people, as well as certain parts of, for example, the Hong Kong government. There's some legislators that are super into the concept. And so Chinese people have a lot of experience with evading bans, evading, for example, the Great Firewall. Being on Twitter, being on Facebook, being on these different places you wouldn't expect. And the same thing has happened with Bitcoin. So one of the really interesting things I found in my research on the book is that there are these hidden Chinese cypherpunks who really do believe in decentralization and stateless money, and who write about it in public forums, for example, on Nostr and on other places. So that still does exist. And so one of the themes of my research has always been that despite the strongest bans, the most hostility possible, Bitcoin and decentralization still thrives within China and within the Chinese people, despite the best efforts of the Chinese government. So just to give you all an example of some of the bans that have happened, there have been regulatory notices. So the central bank forbade Chinese banks from dealing in Bitcoin. There have been takedowns of KOL accounts, which are kind of like influencer accounts. There are bans on exchanges. So most people in China who are buying, they either have to put a foreign address onto their exchange, or they have to use OTC desks. And there is a mining ban. There's a little bit of back and forth on whether or not there's been a mining ban or not. But in summary, most of the provinces have officially declared that they have a plan to ban Bitcoin mining. There are still people doing underground deals with Bitcoin miners. And if you know some of those people, like, let me know, because I'm always looking to talk to those people. They're a little reluctant to be on the record for like good reason. But if any of you want to have any of those sources, but that does happen. And there is law enforcement for trading. So people always ask me, like, do people actually get arrested in China for trading virtual currencies? My answer is yes, they do. There have been like several people. Now, it's not like a huge amount of people. I don't want to play it up as like this huge surveillance state that's like arresting a ton of people. And it is a bit random. Like, for example, one person got arrested because they were selling Tether to someone else, and then they didn't give the Tether back. So that person went to the cops. I was just like, this person defrauded me. But in addition to defrauding me, they used illegal virtual currencies. So yeah, that person got arrested. So don't do that if you're in China. But there are jail penalties. Since 2021, the judicial authorities have been involved, including the Supreme People's Courts and Supreme People's Procuratorate, which does mean jail sentences. So people have had 9 to 13-month jail sentences. Cool. Another topic that people ask you a lot is what is up with the digital yuan? What is up with the digital payments ecosystem in China? There's WeChat Pay, Alipay, 94% of market share there. There's tons and tons of people using digital payments in China. More and more of a cashless society. But what does that look like? Why is the Chinese government trying to introduce the digital yuan? And so since 2014, there's been research on the digital yuan. 2016, they created a digital currency research initiative headed by a regulator who used to work in the African Division Development Bank and also worked with the People's Bank of China. And they really accelerated it because of fears of Libra. If anybody still remembers what Libra was, or still remembers what happened with Libra, I don't really know what happened, but anyways, that happened and a bunch of governments got super concerned. And then they always write about how they're looking to displace cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and others as forms of private money. So this is where I think the fight to me is quite clear, and it's not like a black and white thing. There are people in the Hong Kong government. There's a legislator, Johnny Ng, who's like super pro Web3 or something. There are assumably lawmakers. There's a professor in Hong Kong who wrote about how the Bitcoin mining ban was a mistake. So I don't want to say like everything's a monolith. I don't want to paint this as a simple black versus white narrative. But I will say there seems to be a very clear path of having government-controlled rails or government-mediated in the case of WeChat Pay and Alipay, and private monies that are harder for governments to access and tap. And so, I do think that is an ongoing conflict. And I believe in China, this is where the conflict is most resonant, since China is the country with the most headway on the digital yuan. However, there are 10 or 11 other countries that are developing CBDCs. So if all you wanted to see a preview, this is kind of what it looks like, because people always ask me, like, what does the digital yuan look like? So yeah, you basically have a little bank account. If any of you have had access with like different payment options, it's like not so dissimilar. If any of you have used like WeChat Pay or Alipay or Shake Pay, I guess, in the Canadian context. But the general idea, I know this is all in Mandarin, so like no one can read, but like on the first slide, it's basically all the banks that you can sign up accounts with, and they've accepted foreigners signing up as well. And then the second one is basically just like your account, and then you can get money, and then you can also send money through QR codes. And they also have like hardware security like cards as well as like a form factor. So just some key numbers of digital yuan, just so people know. It's rolled out 29 pilot cities and regions. One of the things that like concerned me about it is it actually, when they did the trials, they did an airdrop too, which is actually kind of funny. They literally like texted people and they were like, you have 200 renminbi waiting for you. Just like claim it at this number. So imagine if you're a country and you have like access to the emergency broadcasting system, and that's like how you did your ICO. That's basically what happened in China. And so they did that across different pilot cities and regions, but it's pretty rolled out. If you go to the Beijing Metro, for example, they accept ECNY. There's been about $14 billion in cumulative usage from 2021, 2022. There's like slightly more now. It's about $250 billion in half a year. It's about 0.16% of China's monetary supply currently. but definitely like slower numbers. And part of the reason why is because so many people are used to WeChat Pay and Alipay, and then also people who are trying to get out of the Chinese system, as we discussed. They're trying to use Tether, they're trying to use Bitcoin or other alternatives as well. Just for quick reference, like Alipay can process about 544,000 transactions. The ECNY can barely clear 10,000. So part of the reason why I think central banks are likely going to fail, and Canada has like a pilot project Jasper where they're looking to do wholesale CBDCs with other countries. And there's a few other countries that are looking to do CBDCs, Nigeria with the e-Naira, the Sand Dollar, and a couple of other places. But one of the things is like central banks aren't tech companies. Like they're not developers, they're not builders. And so they really struggle with user adoption. And I think even with China, even though they've been trying to encourage that with government employees and everything related to that, there still isn't that much adoption, and private solutions are still winning out, albeit government-mediated solutions. So just to give you all an example of some of the privacy tiers and implications and where I think the debate kind of boils down. So in China, in order to use the ECNY, you have to give a phone number. So right off the bat, like, if you're working on any solution like Lightning Network, or if you're working on, I don't know, Monero, or you're working on like whatever else, like the fact that people's identifiers are not actually associated with necessarily their identity, the fact they're pseudonymous, gives like a really big advantage and push. And a lot of people, for example, I mentioned those people who posted on Nostr, and they all cite like the fact that like they don't have to put their phone number or email in, because it's like a huge privacy implication. And Chinese people know a lot about privacy and surveillance and everything related with that. There were in-person protests where people were tracked down with facial recognition, they were detained and things like that. So these things do have real consequences. And as you can see, like the more you try to have like more money, the more onerous and the more strict the regulations become. So it gets to the point where you need like a resident ID card, you need a personal bank account tied up, you need your mobile number. And so imagine you have all that, and then you have a wallet that's tied to every spending transaction that you have. And that wallet can be controlled in terms of the interest rate. The money was actually, that was the thing I was talking about. During the trial, the money was actually set to expire after 2 weeks. So if you can just imagine a world where there's expirable money, controllable money, and surveilled money. And so I think, just in summary, there's going to be a fight between decentralization and control. And I really do believe in countries like China, you will see the forefront of this. And China is working with all kinds of different other countries, Iran, Bangladesh, and other different countries in terms of exporting its model to other countries around the world. And so if you think about that like sorry, I'm going to be kind of a little bit of a dev right now, but like an API, China's trying to like export its standards and its platforms to countries around the world. It's trying to take advantage of the fact that it is a country and it can speak to other countries on terms that other countries can understand and agree with. But for people who are trying to transact in decentralized currencies, right? This is where I think the fight is, where if you create money that can't be surveilled, or that's very difficult to surveil, that can't be controlled, that can't be expired, that isn't tied to the government, this is where I think the 21st century will be fought and won over. Thank you. Goodbye.